Who are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk to you about matters related to professional and business success and wealth building. It's the broadest array of topics of any of my shows, and this particular one is an outgrowth of the original Way to Wow shows, which is why in the crawl below me you see that it's in its fifth season. So today I've started kind of an informal series within this particular show. So talking about books that I have found very useful to gaining or to building my skills, to improving my ability to accomplish the goals and objectives that I set for myself. And somebody once told me that these days our best mentors oftentimes are books. And I think that that's very much the case. So whereas it can be difficult to find a human mentor, and people are busy, and so it feels like we're maybe impinging on them or on their family time if we have an active mentoring relationship with someone. A book there's no such problem with a book. It's always there for us. The author, if it's a well-written book, has really created a resource that we can use. And so aside from being a bibliophile, I am a big believer in books. And I realized I meant to grab the book so that you could see it, and I had to be in a hearing this morning, so I won't be able to do it. So what I'll do is I'm going to bring it up on Amazon so that you can see the particular book that I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, as they say. And let's see, where is it? Oh, okay. So there you can see it off to the side. And the name of the book is Practice Perfect. Let's see if I can move it over here. So you see it a little bit bigger. And the book is written by Doug Lemov. I think that's how his name is pronounced. Erica Woolway, and Katie Yezzi, and Dan Heath. Oh, Dan Heath wrote the foreword. So it was written now 12 years ago, and you can see the topic: 42 rules for getting better at getting better. So if you saw any of the promotions for the show, you saw that I titled the show "Practice Does Not Make Perfect." So the problem with that old adage, and I don't know about you, but I was raised on the adage "practice makes perfect," right? The problem with that is if we're practicing in such a way that doesn't lead to improvement, what the practice does is it keeps us in a mediocre state, or worse, it keeps us using essentially habitualized behavior that is counter to our being able to reach whatever goal or objective we've set for ourselves. And so in order for practice to be effective, the practice needs to be of a particular type. And that's the argument that Lemov et al. Make in their book. So I'm not going to go through all 42. It's way too much. But I've done a select list of 10 that will allow you to get kind of the flavor of the book, and hopefully will encourage you to get and read the book, because I think you will find that it will absolutely be one of the best mentoring tools that you've ever used. So, like I said, I'm just going to kind of go through them. It's going to be, I think, a bit of a shorter show today. So the first thing is, we shouldn't engage in practice. We need to engage in what Lemov I'm just going to use Lemov as the shorthand for all the authors, calls deliberate practice. So this really emphasizes that it has it's structured and purposeful practice. Okay, we're not just repeating tasks. Okay, we're practicing with a particular goal in mind. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. So when I was a child, my dad was really into sports. He played football in college. He played basketball, not in college, but I'm not college level per se. But he played basketball. He swam. He was a lifeguard. He was a small arms instructor. I mean, very, very athletic guy. And one of his fondest hopes was that his son would follow in his footsteps athletically. I'm sorry to report that I pretty dashed that hope on my father's part. Although the day that I started on my soccer team in junior high school, my dad may have been the proudest man in the world. And then when I broke my collarbone playing soccer, he knew that I was completely committed, or maybe should have been committed. But anyway, my dad, when I was a kid, wanted to teach me how to dribble a basketball. Okay. And the way I looked at it was dribbling a basketball is just, slapping the basketball. But indeed, that's actually not. And my dad showed me, you actually dribble with your fingertips, because that's what gives you ball control. Okay. And the problem for me was I found that boring, right? So all the times that I played basketball, all of them poorly, right? I did not have the self-discipline to do deliberate practice, meaning really focus on the proper way to dribble a basketball. Okay. And, I just wanted to be like the players I saw on TV, really fast and agile. But of course, you don't start out that way. You start out slowly. And so my dad would encourage me, just dribble it slowly. Don't worry about speed. Worry about focus on technique. And once you've ingrained the technique, then you can work on speed and agility and all of that. Okay. So unfortunately, I just, like I said, I didn't have the self-discipline to engage in deliberate practice. I would just practice, but the practice wasn't doing me any good because it wasn't improving my skill at dribbling a basketball. So you say, well, who cares about dribbling a basketball? Well, I'm just using that as an example. But I think it's, even if you're not into basketball, like me, I'm not into basketball, but I think you can see that the difference between trying to dribble a basketball flat-handed, where you're kind of slapping at it, and getting used to dribbling it essentially with your fingertips, where they're almost acting like shock absorbers, right? Those are very different things. And maybe intuitively you can sense that actually, if you do it the correct way, it gives you a lot more ball control. And of course, in basketball, ball control is essentially everything. If you can't control the ball, you're not going to get a chance to shoot. And if you don't get a chance to shoot, you're not going to score and your team's not going to win, right? Okay, so that's number one. It's not about practice. It's about deliberate practice that focuses on a specific goal or a specific element that needs to improve. Number two, skills need to be broken down. Okay, so like I'm going to continue with the dribbling example, because I think it so illustrates what we're talking about. So it may not seem like it, but dribbling a basketball is a complex task. Okay, so standing in place and dribbling isn't necessarily particularly complex, but of course, standing in place and dribbling doesn't get you anywhere, right? Because you got to be able to move the ball up and down the court and get to the place where you can shoot and hopefully score a goal, right? So the process of dribbling and moving, that is a complex task, because you can't, the other one of the things, I did not have particularly good eye-hand coordination. And in order to be able to dribble effectively, if you've ever watched, professional or even college players, right, they're not watching they're not watching their hand, right? They're keeping an eye out on where are the other team members, and where are the opposition team members, right? So you've got to be able to keep situational awareness at the same time that you're controlling the ball and moving on the court, and keeping in mind that there's something called traveling, where if you move without dribbling the ball, essentially that's a not a foul, but it's not allowed in basketball, and so that would mean turning over possession of the ball, right? And so this is a complex skill, dribbling the basketball, and so it needs to be broken down, and that's one of the things my dad worked with me on. He says, don't worry about moving fast. Just concentrate, first of all, just on habituating this motion with using your fingertips, right? That was the first step. If I had been able to master that, then I could have potentially gone on to mastering that part of that skill with moving, right? And then eventually, as I got skilled enough at dribbling properly in terms of my hand and being able to move and still control the ball, I could stop, having to focus on my watching my dribbling, and I could, develop my situational awareness on the court while still retaining ball control, right? So those are different steps, and each would be designed to be a manageable part of deliberate practice, but trying to do all of them at once it's too complex, and no part of the skill could be mastered, and so the skill itself wouldn't be mastered. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, focus on feedback. So getting feedback is essential, and this is where having a great coach or a great teacher is so important. Now, if you recall the show I did on talent is overrated, one of the key aspects of becoming talented, because indeed we're not really born talented per se, we develop talent. So I use the examples of Mozart and oh shoot, I'm going up his name, Tiger Woods, the famous golfer. Okay, both of them had extraordinary coaches, teachers in their fathers, who from a very early age gave them the kind of feedback they needed to improve. Now, excuse me, in essence, what they were doing was they were engaging in the kind of practice that Lemov advocates in his book, right? And so that's what it takes. So someone who will watch what we're doing and give us that continual constructive criticism. Okay, so for my dad, I would start out, dribbling with my fingertips, but inevitably I'd get lazy and start, using my palm, and he'd say, keep it on the fingertips, that kind of thing, right? And again, that may sound trite, but that's that kind of continuous constructive criticism. First of all, I think it does a couple of things. Obviously, one thing that it does is it keeps us focused on the kind of deliberate practice we need to be doing to improve the skill. But second of all, it desensitizes to us it desensitizes us to receiving criticism and interpreting it as negative. Okay. So for a lot of people, even if they're given genuine constructive criticism, it still feels like they're being put down or they're being negatively criticized. So especially as we work with our children, especially young children, if we can help them learn to accept constructive criticism as the avenue to getting better at what they're doing. Now, by the way, constructive criticism is different than praise. Okay. So it's one thing to say to them, you're doing great. That's really good. I mean, some encouragement is fine as well. But to get them used to, something like, it'll be better if you do it this way, or keep it on the fingertips, those kinds of things. Okay. We hopefully we raise children and then into adults who are not so sensitive to getting feedback that will help them improve, i.e. constructive criticism. Okay. But if we want to get better, if we have to give up this idea that anytime someone suggests a different way for us to do something, that's a hit to our ego, or it's a put down. Okay, we have to look at it contextually. We have to understand who is the person, what is their relationship to us, why are they saying these things to us, and we need to acclimate ourselves to the point where we're really welcoming feedback that will help us improve. Okay, next, we have to make practice consistent. Okay, so I'm going to switch now to a different example, and that is I taught myself to play the ukulele. Okay, and I bought a ukulele when I was in the Navy, when we did a port call coming back from deployment in 2011, I believe it was. We stopped off at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I was in the what's called the exchange, the Navy exchange there, and they were selling ukuleles, and I thought, I remember having one as a kid, and I thought, I'm going to get one. Wasn't very expensive. And from time to time, I would pick it up and kind of play with it a little bit, but never for very long, and never consistently. And so I never learned to play the ukulele. And then when the Navy sent me to Germany, I was going to be what's called a geo-bachelor, meaning I was going to be there without my family. I decided I'm going to bring my ukulele with me, and I'm going to commit to practicing every day but Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath. And I started out, I think, practicing just 15 minutes a day. And then I went up to 30 minutes a day. And I think I eventually worked up to an hour a day. And mostly what I did is drilling. So I did different kinds of drills. I did finger picking drills. I did strumming drills. I did different different chords. Okay, just to get the basic the basic aspects of playing the ukulele down. And after about 6 or 7 months of doing that, I could actually play it pretty well. And although more recently I haven't practiced on a regular basis, what I find now is when I do pick up the ukulele, okay, a lot of it comes back to me pretty quickly, so that motor memory of how my fingers need to move has been retained because of the consistent practice. So anytime we want to really get good at something, it's better to practice 15 minutes a day over 4 days or 5 days a week than it is to practice 1 hour a day only once a week. The consistent practice, the continual and engaging in practice, is much more efficient for becoming better, for getting better at getting better, right? To use Lemov's term, than a large chunk of practice, but just kind of every once in a while. Okay, so make practice consistent. Next, practice under pressure. Okay, so we want to practice in conditions that mimic real life stressors or that help us prepare for actual situations. So continuing with the ukulele practice that I did. So when I got back from Germany, by then I had graduated from my soprano ukulele to I had gotten a alto ukulele while I was in Germany, a really beautiful ukulele and it was bigger. And as you can see, I have these kind of fat fingers. So I found it was easier for me to play the alto ukulele, and that also made it more fun to practice. Right, a soprano ukulele is so small for someone who has these chubby fingers. It wasn't as much fun, right? And so then I started playing songs and sort of pretending like I was actually performing. So when I got back from Germany to Los Angeles, number one, I bought a tenor ukulele, which was even bigger than the alto ukulele and was even easier to play. I bought it. I found a used one, a very unique instrument that wasn't particularly expensive, and then I bought an inexpensive amplifier because the ukulele I bought had a hookup, so I could plug it in and I could play it through an amplifier like I might do if I were playing a concert. And I got a microphone, and I started playing songs and singing the songs. And one of my favorites was Jet Plane, the famous John Denver song. I got to be able to play that really well. Learned to play the Three Penny Opera version of Mac the Knife. So various songs that I really liked. And I put together a notebook with the sheet music basically as if I were going to play a concert. And sometimes I would even do a little bit of patter in between the songs, that kind of thing, to make it seem like because my at least at that time my goal was seeing if I could maybe get a gig somewhere to play the ukulele, right? So practice under pressure. In other words, set things up to make it as real as you possibly can. Okay, to make the circumstances as authentic to real life as you possibly can. Because then when you go on to actually do these things in real life, you'll be much more comfortable making that transition. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of a different twist on this, but I think this applies. So I knew someone who had a business helping people recover from traumatic brain injuries. Now, at the time she entered the profession, this type of therapy was only done in essentially a rehab center venue. Okay, so people and oftentimes it was done on an inpatient basis. She and I think a couple of colleagues got together and came up with the idea of home-based rehabilitation for people who suffered from traumatic brain injuries. And what they saw was someone who was rehabilitated from a brain injury in a clinic or in a rehab center, they would get to the point where about as much had been done in the clinic as could be done. And so now it was time for them to go home. But then when they got home, it was as if they had to start over again because they had to acclimate themselves to a completely different environment. And so what this friend of mine figured out was, once someone can go into rehab, it's better to let them go home and have the rehab people come to the person at home, rehab them in the environment in which they're going to live. First of all, it's a lot faster getting them up to speed and back as much as possible to living their previous life. That's number one. Number two, it's a lot less expensive. So but at the same time, the clinicians could be paid more. So insurance companies loved it because there was a lot less overhead because it wasn't taking place in a clinic. And yet at the same time, my friend who started a business doing this, she could pay her people a lot more than they would have made working in a clinic. So it was an across the board win-win for everybody. So insurance companies reduced costs. People doing the excuse me, doing the rehabilitation. There were speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, etc. They got paid more than they would have in a clinical setting. My friend developed a very lucrative business that she eventually sold for, I think, 7 figures. And most importantly, because this is really what she was after, was the people got the patients got a much better rehabilitation experience, as did their family and their loved ones. Okay, so like I said, it was a win-win for everybody, really kind of the essence of entrepreneurship. So that's another way of sort of practice under pressure. In this sense, the person being rehabilitated was rehabilitation, right? It's nothing more than a form of practice. They're practicing in the environment where they're going to live. Okay. All right. Next, slow down. Okay. I mentioned this when I was talking about the example of learning to dribble a basketball, when I was talking about deliberate practice. So speed in the beginning is actually the enemy of learning to do a skill well. Speed comes kind of on its own. The better you master the skill, the faster you'll be able to do it. But starting out trying to do it fast will impede your ability to improve your skills. So slow down, concentrate on accuracy. Okay. So when I was so here's another example with my dad. See, I love talking about my dad, right? So I mentioned my dad is a small arms instructor. So we used to go target shooting together. Sometimes at an indoor range with pistols, sometimes at an outdoor range with rifles. And having grown up watching westerns and the Lone Ranger and trying to think of the other ones I used to watch. But anyway, Lone Ranger was one of my favorites. Oh, the Cisco Kid. That was my all-time favorite. Duncan Ronaldo. I actually got to meet him once. I was just overawed. He lived in Santa Barbara when I was living there. But every kid I think wants to be able to bang, 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 like they see, on TV or in the movies, right? The reality is that, my dad would teach me, just to start out slow. Okay. Start out real slow. Even when he was teaching me to fire a semi-automatic, weapon, it wasn't like, bang, 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 like that. That was, he said, shoot, re-aim, shoot, re-aim, or check your aim, shoot, check your aim, right? Make sure, like in the case of a rifle, he had this beautiful Browning lever action 30-30 rifle. But for, I think I shot it for the first time. I was maybe, I want to say 18. And I was a small, I'm still a small guy, but I was even smaller then. If I didn't keep it, tucked into my shoulder properly, it was like, wham! And I ended up with a bruised, shoulder. So, get it, set it, fire. Okay, reset. In other words, make sure it's really against my shoulder properly. Aim, right? That was much more important than trying to just, bang, 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 rip off a whole lot of shots that weren't going to be accurate. So I think it's the movie Shane. The character Shane is talking to the little boy about gunfighting, basically. And is it Shane? Maybe not. Maybe it's a different movie. But it's one of these gunfighting movies. And one of the things the gunfighter says is the guy who wins the gunfight is not the one who's fastest on the draw. It's the one who's surest on the draw. Because someone who's just fast, they're as likely to have the shot go astray and have to fire a second time. And in the meantime, someone who's sure of shot is going to, connect on the first shot, right? So to give up a split second of speed in order to make sure you're on target is far more important than speed itself. So for all of those examples, whichever one resonates with you, right? Slow down your practice. Okay, next, visualization and mental practice. Okay, so think about in your mind your practice. This is something I did with when I was practicing my ukulele. So one of the things I had to learn was finger picking skills. And so sometimes I would just picture in my mind the moving of my fingers in the way they needed to move when I couldn't be practicing. So I'd be in bed, and for whatever reason I couldn't sleep, and so I just sort of lay back, close my eyes, and focus on the movement of my fingers, or strumming. So I would just, in my mind, I would go over different strums. So like a strum, up down up, or up down up strum, or a down down up down, or something like that. I would whatever I might have practiced earlier that day, I would sit back and just kind of visualize them. And that can be a very powerful tool for ingraining into your mind the practice that you're trying to make perfect. Okay. Overlearning. So people say, I don't want to overlearn. I don't want to overtrain. So there is, you can overtrain. So for example, when I ran a marathon, I overtrained for the marathon. I especially as I got closer to the race itself, I ran a lot more miles getting ready for it than I needed to, which degraded my performance somewhat on marathon day. So that kind of overtraining can be problematic. What isn't problematic and what is desirable is overlearning, in the sense that we should continue to practice and continue to practice beyond initial proficiency, right? Keep getting better and better. Look for ways to improve on our improvement, okay, so that the skills become second nature. So I'll use the example of the ukulele. One of the things I needed to be able to do was to finger chords without looking at my fingers. Okay. Because if I'm going to perform, I want to be looking at the audience. So I can't be looking at my strumming or looking at the chords. Now, once in a while, maybe like if it's a particularly difficult chord, or if it's a particularly difficult section of the piece where I really have to, change chords quickly. So I may have to look at it then, and that's fine. But I can't be staring at my hand the whole time I'd be performing. That would not engage the audience. So I really had to overlearn, especially the different chord patterns, in order to become very proficient at playing the ukulele, right? And that's where we want to get to. We want to get to the point where our practice is second nature. Okay. I used the example earlier of dribbling the basketball, right? Where I would have had to get to the point where I could dribble the basketball without looking at it, because I have to be aware of what the other players are doing, right? If I'm just sitting there concentrating on dribbling the basketball and I'm not keeping track of the other players, they're going to steal the basketball from me every single time, which of course, by the way, they did, which was why I always got chosen last anytime it was, I was playing basketball. So, okay. So overlearn, really commit to making what you're doing second nature. Okay. Excuse me. So reflect and refine. Okay. So think back about your practice sessions. How did they go? How could they have gone better? What could be done in order to make them more efficient in helping you improve? So again, using the example of learning to play the ukulele. So I did that a lot. What I started doing was far less efficient in helping me maximize my practice time than where I got to after several months. So first of all, I organized my different drills in a way that would minimize downtime, so I could just go from one drill to the next, and there was a flow to them. Okay, and I would, when I would be out running, I would think about, how can I speed up my improvement, not speed up the playing, but speed up the improvement by, getting a full, 30 minutes of practice out of a 30-minute session, as opposed to, 5 or 10 minutes of that session being devoted to maybe having to switch books or things like that. Okay. So reflect on your practice and then refine it, make it more efficient, make it more focused on what you need to do. So, once I got to a certain level of proficiency, I also refined my practice. I started learning different kinds of strums, and at first I tried making them up, and it didn't really work. So I did some research online, and I found different tutorials on different types of strums that I could use, and then I learned those strums, and then I applied them to different songs to see which strums were best for a particular song. And so eventually I turned my practice sessions into playing actual songs, so that so that the playing of the songs was part of my drilling, right? And that's really what brought it all together. Okay, finally, coach and self-coach. So have a coach. I had a friend from high school, Jean, who was a very talented musician. She was a piano player, among other things. And I don't remember how, but I think I happened to see on a Facebook post of hers one day that she had taught herself to play the ukulele. And I knew she was a music teacher because when we were in high school, I had asked her if she would give me piano lessons. Now, I did want to learn to play the piano, but the fact of the matter is I also wanted to spend time with Jean. so that was kind of a double, that was, my clever high school way of convincing a girl to spend time with me, right? So Jean at the time lived in Northern California. And so she was really happy to hear that I was learning the ukulele, and she was very excited about teaching me remotely. And so we would meet, I think it was once or maybe twice a week, for maybe just 30 or 40 minutes. And she would coach me on ways to improve. And one of the things that she coached me to do was to learn different strumming patterns and such to fit the songs. Because up until I started working with Jean, I was basically using the same strumming pattern on the ukulele for every single song. And so this was interesting. And you almost literally could have knocked me over with a feather when Jean told me this, because I really was pretty overawed by her ability as a musician. And I mentioned to her during one of our practice sessions that the reason when I knew Jean in high school, I played the clarinet. Now, one thing about the clarinet is it's not an instrument you play and sing with, right? Because the clarinet is in your mouth, right? And one of the reasons I wanted to learn to play the piano was you could play the piano and sing with it. And I love to sing. If you happen to drive by me on the freeway, you will see me singing along with the radio a lot of the time, right? Or in the shower, whatever. I never got particularly proficient at the piano for much of the same reason I never got proficient at basketball. But having already gained some proficiency with the ukulele, it never occurred to me that it was a difficult skill to play and sing at the same time. And so I was telling Jean about this, and she said, all the years I've been a musician, I've never been able to play and sing at the same time. She said, it's really great that you can do that. that one coaching moment between the two of us was perhaps the most amazing coaching breakthrough I had in anything that I did with the ukulele. The idea that I was doing something that this musician that I had at that point, Gene and I had known each other for decades. It would have been, over 30 years, probably close to 40 years at that point. That I revered her musical ability and her teaching ability, and I could do something that she just couldn't do. And I was like, I can't even believe that. And then when she taught me to play different strumming patterns and that kind of stuff. So having a coach who can help you improve, who can keep in context your ability. And many times, by the way, coaches are coaching their players, whether it's sports or musical instruments, whatever. The player is actually better at it than the coach is. The coach's skill is in the teaching and the coaching, right? And so to have someone who's really strong in that area, there is just nothing better than that. But we also have to learn to self-coach. So we have to learn to overcome our frustration. We have to work to overcome our lethargy. We have to learn to overcome a lack of discipline. And, a coach can help with that. But in the end, we also have to be able to self-coach. And so for me, for example, when I was first getting into playing the ukulele almost every day of the week, I would actually put it in my calendar. And that was a technique I learned. I forget who it was, probably Zig Ziglar or something like that, reinforced by my friend Bill Gross, that if you really are committed to doing something, put it in your calendar, right? So I put my ukulele practice time in my calendar. And when my calendar pinged, it was time to practice the ukulele, I went and practiced the ukulele, right? So that we can use tools like that to improve our self-coaching ability. So let me just real briefly go over these 10 items again. Deliberate practice, break down skills, focus on feedback, make practice consistent, practice under pressure, real life circumstances, slow down, right? Visualize in your mind practicing, overlearn, make it second nature, reflect and refine on your drilling and your practicing, and finally, get a coach and learn to self-coach. So these 10 things, whether we're learning to do a skill like play basketball, play a musical instrument, or do something that's more professionally oriented, maybe learning how to do public speaking, maybe learning to write, maybe doing a show like this, doing a podcast or a video podcast, whatever. All of these require practice in order to improve. But we want to do perfect practice, not just practicing the same old way we do things, keeping at a mediocre level. And if we do that, then we get on this path of consistent improvement, then pretty much nothing is not within our ability to achieve. Now, I'm gonna temper that with this remark, because I can hear this coming through the screen here. Yes, no matter how good at dribbling I became, I was never going to become a great basketball player. I was too small. Okay, too short, too small. Okay, even back then when basketball players were smaller than they are today. Okay, so there are certain constraints of physicality that no matter what I was not going to be in the NBA. Okay, I never aspired to, but I wasn't going to be if I had. Okay, so setting those kinds of physical constraints aside, if we are willing to commit to deliberate practice and all the other aspects of perfect practice, we will inevitably improve in whatever area it is that we've set our goal. So that's the show for today. Again, the book is Practice Perfect by Doug Lemov and Erica Woolway and Katie Yezzi. Yezzi. And I will put a link to the book in the show notes on Amazon, as all the links are. It'll be a affiliate link. I think I would get 3 or 4 cents if you buy it, but I required to announce that, and you'll see there'll be a little hashtag ad next to the link, because that's what Amazon requires to comply with FTC regulations and such. So I thank you very much for joining me today. And tomorrow is my every other week show, Jiggers' Place, at 5 p.m. Pacific time. This is an opportunity, as the week is ending, for us to get together, have a cocktail. And my topic for tomorrow is come on, get happy, right? And I'm going to talk about something I think that many of us, me included, for a long, long time, pursued something that I thought would make me happy, which actually did the opposite. It took me away from being happy. And when I embraced the antithesis of that, I realized that was really what was going to make me happy. So sit back. Hopefully you'll enjoy a cocktail. By the way, if you want the cocktail recipe, please sign up for my email list. Go to my website, bemmel.com, scroll down to the bottom, put in your email address and click submit, and you'll get an email a couple of hours before showtime with the cocktail recipe. I try not to use real exotic stuff in my recipes, so if you have just a few things, a whiskey, a rye, a rum, a gin, and some soda water, maybe some honey syrup, and a few other things, some bitters. Usually that's all you need to make a cocktail. Once in a while, like in the cocktail I'm doing tomorrow, I use a ginger liqueur. That's probably not something most people have in their bar. But you know what? Even if you don't have every single ingredient, you can still make it. It's still probably going to be pretty good. So if you want to get those recipes, please do sign up for my email list. And while we're talking about shameless promotions, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do consider subscribing, and that way you'll also get a reminder before each show going live. So, and then next week on Monday is a special show for Veterans Day. So I hope you'll join me for a special edition of the Way to Wow show. And then on Tuesday of next week, 10 a.m. Pacific time, same as on Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, will be my show, Business Lessons from the Military. And then I'll be back a week from today with the next edition of People Making Money. So one last time, thanks so much for joining me. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off. Marie, darling, you are